أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ففهمنا سليمان وكلنا آتينا حكما وعلما رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم سبحانك لما وحنانيك علم لا تنسني ولا تنسني الحمد لله أفضل الحمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله وسائر النبيين والصالحين وسلم الموفقني واهدني وسددني واجمع لي بين الصواب والثواب وعذني من الخطأ والهرمان آمين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to another episode of Questions and Answers. I'm your host Amjad Muhammad, and I'll be with you for up to 8 p.m. this evening from our studio here in Bradford off Manchester Road. And the program is about questions and answers, so that's what we will be dealing with. For that, you need to know the phone number, and that is 01274 214299. That is 01274 214299. And in case you wish to email, then the email address is q&a@iqra.tv. That's q&a@iqra.tv. So please do get your calls in. Do get your email sent to us. We have a call who's already called in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear caller.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Mulana Sahib, can you explain on this issue that Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Sahaba Ikram, how much they used to hate slavery and how much they used to free slaves, how much wealth they used to spend, how much effort they used to make to free people from slavery. In modern ages, there are different types of slaveries, like through wars you make slaves of the other nation, through debt you make other nation your slaves, and like human trafficking, there are so many types of slavery, like people who in Muslim countries, people who work in their house, like wash their dishes or clean their house, how we treat them and how much we care about their rights, how much we care about their equal rights, and even though they are like they work for us, but how much we pay attention towards these people, because from all over the world Muslims come in these countries to have equal right, and we don't care in our Muslim countries how much we should debate on these issues, get together and have we should debate these issues with fellow scholars. Women, they should pay attention that they are not oppressing anybody, or they are not taking anybody else's rights, and we should give everybody their rights.
Okay, Jazakallah khair, sister. I'll touch upon that. Jazakallah khair. So we had our sister calling in on 01274 214299, and you can do likewise. She got in there quick, and please do not hesitate to call. I can pause my answer and take your question as well. But let's deal with the sister's question, very important topic. She started speaking about slavery and then talked about the kind of modern forms of slavery. So let's discuss slavery first of all. Now remember, in the times of the Prophet ﷺ, there was a concept of slavery. It meant that it was actually legitimate, legalized. Now this had preceded Islam. So there was a legitimate form of buying and selling humans that existed prior to Islam. When Islam came in, there is a number of reasons why Islam did not abolish slavery altogether. And there's, for instance, many of those people who had been taken from their homes, either because they'd been brought from some foreign countries, or because after battles they'd been taken when their husbands and their fathers were killed, and therefore they were taken, the children were taken as slaves and the women were taken as slaves, then it meant that they had no historical links to anywhere now. So they had now become, in this unfortunate circumstance, dependent upon this structure of master and slave. That's how it was structured. So you find, for example, that the Prophet ﷺ, because this existed, he initiated the process of encouraging his companions, radiallahu anhu ajma'in, to free slaves. So whenever there is a kafara to be given, an expiation for a sin, the Prophet ﷺ always talks about fakku raqaba, freeing a slave, free 5 slaves, free 10 slaves, free slaves. And it was a highly rewarding act, was to free slaves. We know Bilal radiallahu anhu, who was a slave before when he had accepted Islam, and when Sayyidina Abu Bakr bought his freedom and set him free. So we find numerous examples like that in which we are encouraged to free slaves. And that is obviously in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Even in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there was a time where a man was behaving disrespectfully with his slave. So the Prophet ﷺ stopped him, and he said, and he taught him the rules. And he literally said that he should wear what you wear, he should eat what you eat, and he should be clothed in the same manner as you are clothed. It is said then that this man, when he was walking with his slave, you could not differentiate between the two of them. So remember, this is the time 1400 years ago when the concept of slavery existed. And yet this is the level of equality in which Islam was pushing and promoting. First it was talking of freeing slaves and removing the concept of slaves through this means, not through abolition, but through this means. You normally see that when abolition is not carried out, then that shows that the society is so structured on it that its abolition would bring about more problems. So instead it is encouraged and it is promoted and it is rewarded. So rather than the sort of stick approach, a carrot approach is taken with regards to slavery. Fast forward now to the 21st, 22nd century, and we talk about human trafficking. We talk about, unfortunately, and this is a reality, where daughter-in-laws get married, brought over, girls, young women get married into a family, and they get brought over and they are treated like the slave of the family or the servant of the family. Or we see, unfortunately, women being tricked and duped into thinking that they're going to become models or they're going to become very famous or whatever, and in reality they are brought here, sadly, for the sake of selling themselves, for the sake of prostitution. And therefore you see this still existing in some forms today. Is this the slavery which the Prophet ﷺ spoke about? No, because remember, that type of slavery was legal. This is a slavery which is illegal, okay? And this is also a slavery which has not been justified. And remember, a slave originates where the person is not free. Here, these people are free people. These are people who aren't a commodity. And I know it's a very uncomfortable language, but I've got to use this language for people to understand that people in those days were considered a commodity. Like we buy a bag of sugar, like we buy a cup of tea, then humans were sold like that. Nowadays, obviously, these are free people in that sense that are now being legitimized into being sold on. Now, they are still free, okay? They are not owned by anybody. Hence, but they are being treated in a bad way. They are being abused. Their rights are being usurped. They are being harmed as a consequence. So we see, unfortunately, particularly women, okay, particularly women, less so men, but particularly women. In fact, you could even say predominantly women. And I wouldn't go as far as saying absolutely women, but it's very close to being absolutely women who are tricked into traveling, particularly from the east to the west, thinking that they're going to get a better life. Either that they're going to be treated equally in a household with their husband and with their sister-in-laws, Or sadly, when they come, they think they're going to get a modeling contract and they're going to become famous and they're going to become rich. Or for whatever reason, they're running away from something. Or as we've seen, when there is a crisis, a refugee crisis, then it tends to be women and children that are, that are moving away from their country of origin. And when they're moving away from their country of origin, they're doing that because of obviously the fear that they're going through, and the men that they have either died, or the men have stayed back to fight, or the men are imprisoned. So it tends to be women and children, and there is the majority of where people can say, look, I will get you safe passage into this country. The woman, the child thinks that's good. I can become a refugee. I can hopefully get looked after. And she unfortunately gets caught into the system, and then there is problems for her because now that man, whoever he is, will now start getting her onto drugs and eventually using her in this particular way. Now, as you can, I'm sure before I even say to you that this is absolutely categorically against Islam and against the Sharia. And it's, this is one of the things, and the sister touches upon that point, is that we sometimes don't speak about parts of our Sharia, and I don't know why, and then when other people do, then we do. So for example, climate change. Islam spoke about climate change 1400 years ago. It talked about only burning that amount of fuel that you need, only using that amount of water that you need, and to not be extravagant in the resources the world has provided, or Allah has provided through the world. And to ensure that animals are looked after, plants are looked after, trees are looked after, the earth is looked after, because we are, as described, a Khalifa. We are a deputy on behalf of Allah to ensure that His wishes, His demands are met on the earth. And one of His demands are that we maintain the earth. We can take benefit from the earth and what the earth produces, but we are supposed to maintain it. Now, we knew about this 1400 years ago, but we didn't make a big hoo-ha of it. We didn't share it with our fellow humans. And then it takes the society 1,000, 1,500 years to work out that, hold on a second here, the amount of plastic we're using and then the fish are consuming, we're actually going to be, eating plastic soon, which is not very good for us. Or the amount of hydrocarbons we're burning is destroying our layers of atmosphere, the ozone layer in particular, which is protecting us from harmful rays of the sun. Or that if we keep burning trees because our insatiable appetite for money and for power, there's eventually going to be not enough trees, and then the soil is held by the trees, so then you're going to get lots of landslides. And never mind that, many creatures live in trees, so their habitat's going to go, so there's animals going out of the food cycle. So other animals then will die out. But we didn't care about that. We were just more, what more can I take from this land? What more can I take from this land? But we knew all of this about climate change, as I said, 1,400, 1,500 years ago. But unfortunately, we did not do anything about that. Okay, we did not do. And now, others speak about it. Now we say, oh yeah, Islam says something about climate change. So similarly, about abusing people, Islam spoke about that 1,400 years ago. I mentioned a narration to you, or I paraphrased a narration to you, in which I mentioned that you have, for instance, a person, this is where slavery was legitimate, where it was legal, and yet the Prophet ﷺ is instructing people to treat that person as your equal. He says, if you give him a task to do and he cannot do that task, then help him. So remember, this is a time when slavery was legitimate, absolutely legal, and yet these are the conditions that the Prophet ﷺ was placing. In fact, what people did then was they freed slaves. They said it's so difficult to maintain and look after the rights of them, so we may as well free them so we're not held accountable on the day of judgment. In case we do something wrong, in case we do raise our voice, in case we do strike them, in case we do treat them unfairly, where they don't sleep like the way we're sleeping, like they don't wear what we're wearing, like they don't eat what we're eating. So they used to free slaves. So they never had that responsibility. They weren't answerable on anything. So, that's what exists. And then now, and we hear about it, and it's a reality. When I say we hear about it, it's not hearsay. Where, families marry a girl from abroad, and that girl comes from abroad, and obviously she's already coming in from a weak position, from an inferior position. She does not know the language. She does not know society. She does not know what her rights are. She just thinks like it was in Pakistan, it's like that in England. How is she going to know any different? And then she's abused. She's taken advantage of. And because she's unfortunately oblivious of what's going on around her, how can she know what her rights are? How can she know what she can and can't do? Because normally these young girls come from villages where the education literacy is very low. And then when she starts to find out about things, when she actually, asks around and people say to her, what, you do that all day? My goodness, that's not what you're supposed to be doing. You're there for your husband. And she starts learning about Islam and what her rights are in Islam. Then she starts to question her husband. And the husband goes for the easy way out, saying, well, I can't do anything, they're my parents. That's not an answer. You're a man. Act like a man. If you're man enough to marry this woman, then act like a man and look after her. At the same time, looking after your parents. But you are responsible for your wife. She is directly your responsibility. If your parents are still relatively young, they're strong, they can earn, they're earning, money is coming in, then they can look after themselves. Your wife is dependent upon you. She's reliant upon you. As are your children. So these are things that, unfortunately then we become, they don't, and then when the wife starts standing up for herself, they say, oh, she's this, she's that, she's, disrespectful, she's this. No. She's now standing to defend herself. Now that she's defending herself, that she's doing something wrong. Well, why did she need to defend herself? Had you been fair and honest with her as soon as she arrived on these shores, she would have no need to defend herself because she would have been treated like a princess. She would have been treated like a queen in her house. Why would she need to kick up a fuss? Why would she need problems? When you're happy at home, getting all your rights fulfilled, why would you cause that sin? You only do that when you're in times of difficulty. So I hope, my dear sister, I've answered your question in great length. I've dedicated the full first session to answer that question in great detail. So there's nothing obscure, there's nothing unclear, and that folk can fully understand what exactly it is that this is about. And the Sharia is all about equality and fairness. It does not, in fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so fair and so equal, He does not even come to judge if you usurp somebody's rights. You will need to settle that score with that person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not step in. So there we have it, my dear brothers and sisters. We're going to now take a short break. We will return. Same number, same email. I will share the number with you just before we go off air, and I will share it with you when we return. So in case you have the number, you can make a call. The number is 01274 214299. Please speak. Don't ring now, and I'll join you after the break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.